Welcome in. It's the early wedge. I'm Rick Gehman, and today we are DFSing the first of 2 weeks overseas. It's the Scottish Open. Joining me to break it all down, Sia Nejad is here. Hello, Sia.
Hello, how we doing? It sounds like this show, based on my early ed show earlier this morning and a couple of comments in the chat, I think we did really well for everybody this week. So hopefully we can run it back for the Scottish Open and the Open Championship as well.
Mike McClure is here. Let's play this game, Mike. I asked you at the end of last week's show. I think I'll ask you at the top of this week's show. What do you think the optimal lineup cost last week?
Ooh. Well, I honestly, I don't know. I cashed lineups with 4 of 6s. Pretty nice. Like in tournaments, 3x my money with 4 of 6s. Mm-hmm. Because Ben Griffin and someone else that I played did not make the cut.
Yes, there was a lot of Ben Griffin disaster. There was a couple of other, like 3 of maybe the 5 most popular golfers, I think, missed the cut. The optimal lineup was $40,400.
Wow.
It's your Brian Campbell's, it's your Emiliano Grillo. I mean, it was very, very low.
We used to play that in a couple sites had like the pro mode or whatever, like 10, 12 years ago, where you intentionally built lineups with 10,000 less. Mm-hmm. I think it's time to bring that back for some of these events.
There was one site, I cannot remember the name of it or how long it lasted, but you could also, they would give you, it was like a flexible cap. So it was like $50,000, but for every 100 you went lower, they would give you 3 points or something like that. Right. And for every $100 you went over, you'd start like 3 points in a hole. So you could pick the best 6 golf. It'll cost you, $75,000 and you're going to start 50 points in the hole or whatever it is. But you could conceivably do it as like a soft cap.
Love it.
That's fun.
Just, it opens up a lot of different possibilities, obviously. Anyway, I digress. There were a lot of really, when it was the wild west, there were a lot of really interesting ways to play. We're going to do it the traditional way this week with a $50,000 hard cap. We'll be going through the pricing, but first let us talk about this golf course. And it's the Renaissance Club, or as you'll hear them say, the Renaissance Club. This is a golf event and course that was primarily a DP World Tour event before it became a co-sanctioned tour event. Sia, like you mentioned, a lot of these guys are going over for the 2-week trip. They've been over there. They're playing around right now. We're seeing things come out on Instagram and Twitter of where they've been up to. But this is going to be the start of Link style golf season.
That's right. And it's interesting to note that from the top, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Rick, we're going to see maybe more Link style next week at the Open Championship versus what we're going to see this week. That doesn't mean this week isn't at the Scottish Open isn't Link style, but I feel like it's also just a little bit more traditional than what we're going to see next week, and that the contrast between this week and next week is actually pretty stark. With that said, I mean, I think also we're going to see some lower scores this week, and we have wind on Thursday, it looks like, but it should kind of settle down, which I think opens itself up for some scoring here. I think when we're looking at metrics, Rick, we're looking at driving distance, off the tee stuff, and then we're obviously looking at long irons as well, and being good with the putter. I mean, these are different types of undulating, bumpy, fescue greens, and I think great putters, I don't think you're going to luck yourself into putting this week personally, so that's something I'm looking for as well.
Last handful of champions here, Mike and Josh. While you have, why don't you throw the scorecard up on the screen so that those watching on YouTube can get a look. There it is, Genesis Scottish Open. And here are the most recent winners. So we've got Robert McIntyre back to defend his title. He actually finished second in 2023 to Rory McIlroy, Xander Schauffele in 2022, and Minwoo Lee in 2021. So 2022 was the first year that this was a co-sanctioned event. Minwoo won it as a DP World Tour event. Aaron Rai won it in 2020. Burns Wiesberger won it in 2019. Is there a through line between those golfers, or is there a through line between the ones that you suspect will have the most success this week?
I don't know that I want to jump too much into those golfers, although I guess the one thing that stands out a little bit to me will be the distance. Like Minwoo Lee pops for distance, club head speed, things like that. But for me, I'm not going to buy too much into the course history. I'm just going to profile the golfer that I want. Sia kind of mentioned it there. Off the tee a little bit. For me, it's definitely driving distance, long irons, at least 200 plus. You can look at individual buckets. I'm kind of just going 200 plus. And then around the green, strokes gain around the green is a metric that I'm weighting a little more heavily than I expected this week. That's kind of be my catch-all rather than focusing on putting. So yeah, heavily on distance around the green, 200 plus, and a little bit of just, again, noisy stat, but the 3-putt avoidance.
The field itself, Sia, is incredibly strong. I believe we'll get the official number technically when this thing tees off, but it's looking like it's going to be the second best field outside of just the Players' Championship this year. But the makeup of it is interesting, right? The co-sanctioned nature of this means you're getting a lot of players who have qualified through DP World Tour, and you're getting a lot of guys that are in here through the PGA Tour. So you're getting the collective of best players on the PGA Tour that play against each other very frequently, and best players on the DP World Tour who play against each other very frequently. There is a little bit of crossover there, but there are almost two groups coming together to meet in a way that I'm not really sure we see in other types of events. I think this is kind of a rare breed when you look at it like that.
It makes it like a much more interesting DFS show and DFS week, because you've got these guys in the, let's say, low 6K, mid 7K range, and they might be more talented than that. We just don't really have we don't really have their work. Like, and I'm talking about like the Jordan Smiths, Matteo Manacero, we've seen a little bit more on the PGA Tour. Neergaard Peterson, we've seen a little bit more, but there's plenty of guys down the line. Let's see, Ewan Ferguson, Laurie Cantor, who again we've seen on the PGA Tour as well. I think it presents an opportunity to maybe take some chances on some guys with, doing a little bit of the background work, knowing maybe where they stand in a field like this. But again, it's really interesting because those players are going to be alongside a lot of players that we're very familiar with, that a lot of people are very comfortable with just from a clicking standpoint, clicking into your DFS lineup. And maybe the difference this week is going to be kind of being able to be dialed in on some of those World Tour players that are actually pretty good.
Yeah, I think there will be a higher likelihood of people clicking the names that they are familiar with, Tom Hoagie over Marco Pengay or something of that nature, right? Just something that they've seen at least on leaderboards in this, what is likely to be a pretty American-centric player pool. But we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the players. It's absolutely stacked. We're going to start naming some names and going through this thing. But first, we're going to take a quick word from our partners.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
Here it is, the cheat sheet on my website, rickrungood.com. There are 3 golfers standing alone at the top of this pricing sheet. Scottie Scheffler, $13,100. Rory McIlroy, $11,400. And Xander Schauffele, $10,100. Mike, you get first crack at this. There's a $3,000 gap between Scottie and Xander. How are we assessing and dealing with the top of this board?
So I think that the pricing is pretty good. First of all, I think it's pretty appropriate. I'm finding it harder to get to Scottie than I was expecting. Some of that is the speaks to the strength of the field that you're kind of referencing, being the second best where we think it comes in. Out of this group, am going to play the most Xander. I'm willing to forgive Xander's quote unquote one bad tournament at the Travelers. It wasn't long before that we were kind of talking about, Xander's really close. We think he's right there. And then proceeds to lose 6 strokes tee to green at the Travelers. I love the fact that he's had some time off since and is going to come into the spot, sentiment not super high. Out of the 3 at the top, though, it is going to be Xander for me. I don't think I'm going to get to Rory. I will probably play one of 3 lineups with Scottie if I only play 3. But certainly not all in on Scottie, not all in on Rory. Could have more than the field on Xander.
Yeah, Xander bookended a really strong stretch with 2 really poor events that kind of wiped away some of those longer term gains from a metric or from a modeling standpoint. Players Championship, you lost 10 strokes to the field. Travelers Championship, you lost 7. Everything in between that was awesome. Sia, when you get access and when you get your hands on this 10K and up range, where do your clicks start going?
Well, the thing I like most about what Mike said about Xander is that he's 10,100. And again, whether you like Scottie or you don't love him as much in this tournament as some of the other ones, it's really hard to get him in a lineup. Like I'm looking at, let's say you throw a 6,900 guy in there, a guy I'm comfortable with that we'll talk about later, like Jacob Bridgman, who I think profiles really well out here. 6,900, you pair him with Scottie Scheffler, it only leaves you with 7,500. And in that case, you're pretty much living in that low 7K range. And so, if you put Rory in there with let's say a Bridgman, I'm just using a random 7K 6,900 golfer, you get 7,925. And so that's still a little bit more to work with. But that 8K range to me is so rich. It's unusual that the 8K range I'm in love with, but for this tournament, I love everything about the 8K range. So what does that tell me? It tells me that I really don't want to play Scottie and then have to, quote, dumpster dive from a price standpoint just to try to fit in some guys I like in the upper 7K and lower 8K range. Rory, it's a little easier to do, but certainly with Xander, it's a lot easier to do. I will tell you that I'm okay. I understand there's so much win equity locked up in the top 3. I'm okay skipping over those 3, just like I was last week, where I was talking about starting lineups with Michael Thorbjornsen, remember, at 9,100 and kind of going down from there. This is a different field. It's a different class. It's a different tournament. But I'm going to have some lineups without any of these 3. But if I had to favor one over the 3 from just, hey, I got to click somebody, just because of the price, it's probably going to be Xander.
It's an interesting conversation to have, Mike. Let's call it 100 lineups. If you made 100 lineups, how many of them do you think would have none of the big 3 and would start in the 9K range?
I think a good amount. I think that answer to me comes down to where you're at on Xander more than where you're at on Scottie and Rory. I think that the 9K and 8K ranges are extremely strong. I think there's a ton of 7K guys that are at least modeling extremely well. So I think that lineups are relatively interesting to build. When we talk about the 9s, there's a guy that I'm going to tell you that I'm much higher on than the market, who I actually have second behind Scottie, and it's
Sam
not
Burns.
Rory. It is not Sam Burns. It is actually Ludwig. We'll talk about the 9Ks coming up. But I have Ludwig second in this, only behind Scottie. And because of that, I'm not getting a lot of Scottie. And I was just looking at it to give you some perspective on like where I've got Scottie relative to everybody else. I have Scottie 14 fantasy points higher, 13.5, than the next best golfer, which is Ludwig. And that is still not getting me more than 5% Scottie Scheffler. So the only way that I can get that where I get a lot of Scottie is to come down closer to market on Ludwig. But if I don't come down on Ludwig and I'm sticking to the model there, it's going to force Ludwig and Xander together, or it's going to force Ludwig and someone else that's rating well in that range. So that's why it's happening for me, but I'm not getting a lot of Scottie, and it's almost purely due to being so strong in that upper 9 range, mid to upper 9 range.
Well, let's get to the 9K range here. So Tommy Fleetwood leads the way at $9,900. Colin Morikawa is $96. Ludwig Oberg, $9,400. Victor Hovland back in action, $9,300. Then we round this thing out with Justin Thomas, Robert McIntyre, and Sam Burns. Sia, we're gonna make Mike hold on to that Ludwig Oberg conversation for just 1 second. When you see this 9K range, and if this is where you're starting your lineups, where are you starting it?
I mean, it's so funny because last week, this is going to sound kind of nutty, and I haven't finalized my lineups, obviously, but remember last week I was like, start at Thorbjornsen or Glover or somebody like that and just work in that 8K range and just have that balanced lineup. I am very tempted to do that again. And I'm not saying I'm going to start lineups with Sam Burns, but I think you can start in this lower 9K range and play a super balanced lineup because I just like the talent of Sam Burns. I think Robert McIntyre probably going to be pretty popular, obviously a pretty decent click. Justin Thomas might not get a ton of attention. I don't mind him on a track like this where you can get away with being wayward with your driver. So listen, I think Ludwig has plenty of upside. It's been a little up and down lately, although his course history here pretty good with the T4 last year. I'm just not in love. I'm not playing Tommy Fleetwood. I'm not going to play Colin Morikawa. Ludwig would be the only guy in the upper 9K range I would consider, but but I can tell you I'm all in on Sam Burns. I'm just going to ride this thing out. I think he has a chance to win this tournament. I think he's a great course fit where he can kind of get after it off the tee, dial in on approach, and obviously he's one of the best putters in the world right now and in general. So Sam Burns would be my favorite guy in the 9K range, and followed up probably by Bobby Mack, and maybe if it's contrarian, maybe Justin Thomas.
5 straight top 20s for Sam Burns, a runner-up finish at the Canadian Open, a coulda, woulda, shoulda at the U.S. Open, ended up for the record sheet finishing as a T7. Mike, I'll just tee you up right here. Let's go to Ludwig. We've got a guy at $9,400 whose last top 10 was the Masters. Sia alluded to the inconsistencies that he's had here in 2025. What do you see, and what does the model see that gets him to be your number 2 golfer?
So with Ludwig, I will say I do like the fact that he's played well at this event last year, but it's an overall skill set situation. It's an overall price point situation relative to others. Driving distance, he's going to rate really well. 3-putt avoidance, again, I'm using it. He rates relatively well there. He's very good with the long irons, 200 plus in the top 10 for sure. I actually have him 5th there. And just the off the tee play in general, I like Ludwig in the spot. He's, I shouldn't, it's not a clear number 2. He's very close to Rory, which again, these are aggressive assumptions I'm making. Rory is definitely probably should be higher. But yeah, he's right there. So Ludwig would be number 1 for me. I am playing a lot of Tommy Fleetwood. Okay. And I am going to play a little bit of Justin Thomas as well in the 9s. So you ask what percentage of lineups may start without anybody in the 10s. That's actually a combo that's really popular for me in the builds is Fleetwood, Aberg, and Thomas, or Fleetwood, Ludwig, Connors, or Fleetwood, Ludwig, Fitzpatrick, which I know that's into the next range that we're getting to, but they're right in that 9K.
That's okay, because I'm going to bounce it right back to you here, because the Connors conversation is already in the chat, and that's thanks to Mitchell here, who is finding it difficult to commit potentially to Corey Connors. He's worried about any health status. So what Mitchell is referring to here is the WD at the US Open. It was after 3 rounds. It was a wrist injury that he actually injured during the round. And Mike, I don't think I've heard anything since, but I guess I haven't heard anything that concerns me either.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything that concerns me. So that's, I'll continue to monitor it, and I'm sure collectively we will all kind of, monitor it and figure it out. I like the fact that was almost a month ago, 3 full weeks ago. So I, assuming it's not something serious, I do believe that 3 weeks is in that range where you can recover from something like that. If it's just, soft tissue type stuff, but I do need to admittedly look into it a little more. But yeah, I'm not concerned.
Good call, Josh. I was just reading the same thing. So Adam Stanley is like the Canadian beat writer for golf, for lack of a better term. So like in the NFL, when you've got like your Jaguars beat writers, like Adam Stanley is the go-to guy for the Canadians. And what Josh is showing is from an article from Sportsnet Canada from the 4th of July or the 3rd of July, so a couple days ago, that Corey Connors is, quote, not quite 100%, but is hopeful and planning to play the Genesis Scottish Open. He has been hitting some balls over the last few days to test things out and has made some progress. Is that enough for you, Mike?
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I guess without seeing any ownership numbers, projected ownership, my take on that is I would want the majority of the people playing DFS to read that and say he's not ready. And if that were the case and the ownership level was low enough, then I would be very comfortable with it. I trust that if he's there and teeing off, he is in good enough shape to play.
That is generally the path that I take, is like, if you are playing this, you're good enough to be playing it. Corey Connors does not need to risk it all for the Canadian Open.
But what if you don't
for
know?
the
What if you don't
Scottish
know? What if you're not 100% sure and you find out in the middle of round one?
Yeah, I mean,
Throwing that out there.
it's not like anything's going to be that different from what it's not like it's not like he's playing against the scout team and then Ray Lewis is going to come take his head off at full speed, right? Like he can simulate the conditions at practice. Like he's going to interact with the turf the same way. Sure. Yeah. Maybe it's more likely something pops up, but I get your point. If I remember correctly, it was like a plugged lie in a bunker and it was kind of a freak thing. So yeah, I don't know. Are you, when you read that, are you like, oh God, there's no chance I'm touching this guy?
Well, the thing, I mean, I understand what Mike said at the tail end there, where like people are going to be afraid and maybe they're not going to play him, but let's just assume he gets some ownership because he kind of deserves it. But at the same time, I just question what Corey Connors' upside is relative to the guys that are next to him, especially if he's going to get moderate ownership. I mean, I'd rather, again, we'll get to Matt Fitzpatrick, but I'd rather play him. I'd rather play Adam Scott, believe it or not. I think he has a little bit more upside the way he's playing right now. Robert McIntyre's in that range. Sam Burns. You can even make the argument Justin Thomas, of course, Victor Hovland have more upside as well. So I feel like Corey Connors is kind of lost here. And so if he's going to get some ownership, I don't know why I would play him knowing that A, I don't think he has the upside of pretty much every single golfer I just mentioned. And B, I don't know, maybe he does still have an injury.
Okay. That's fair. And I assume that as the week goes on, it's Monday, you get Tuesday, Wednesday pressers. I would highly recommend following Adam Stanley. He will probably tweet out practice round stuff and he will talk to these guys in between. Like we will get more information as this week goes on. Let's continue below Corey Connors. He headlines the $8,000 range at 8,900. Matt Fitzpatrick, Sepp Straka, Adam Scott, Ryan Fox, Harry Hall, Aaron Rye. Then we rounded out with Wyndham Clark, JJ Spawn, and Harris English. Sia, you were alluding to some of the guys up and near Corey Connors and potentially above him. When you see the rest of this 8K range, particularly Adam Scott and below, where do you start looking in this range that you've told us you like so much?
I want to look almost literally everywhere. So let's start with Fitzpatrick, who I might have to just skip over because we know, I mean, already that Fitzpatrick's going to get a lot of ownership and he's going to get a lot of respect because of how he's been playing. And because, he has some good play here as well. T6 in 2022, long iron play, recent play, it all checks for Matt Fitzpatrick, who I think some people think has a top 5, if not outright win coming at some point soon. Adam Scott, I love as well. I've been on him lately. T2 in 2024, also long iron positive. And we never really know when Adam Scott's going to show up, but that's the beauty of DFS. Like if you pick it right, he's going to be there. And the recent play is good there too. Speaking of recent play, Ryan Fox at 8,500, Harry Hall at 8,400. I'm not taking the shot on Wyndham Clark, although I think 8,200 is a good price. And I'll just mention one other name. We play this DFS game, and every single tournament we just forget. Not we, as an industry, we forget JJ Spawn exists. We just don't want him. We just don't want to put him in our lineup because it's not a sexy player. It's not a sexy name. All he does is continue to win. And oh, by the way, he's a great putter, great long iron play, great off the tee. Not as short as people think. I'm not saying in stature, but I'm saying in distance. He actually checks all the boxes. And at 8,100, a guy who we know can win, I don't think he's going to get enough attention. So I'd want to go his way as well.
The most impressive thing I've seen anybody do in quite some time is finish T14 at the Travelers the week after winning the US Open. And could have just did not play well on Thursday, did not play well on Friday, could have just packed it in, said, I'm a US Open champion and moved on. And he rallied on the weekend and finished T14. I'm highly impressed with JJ Spawn. Mike, this $8,000 range is bountiful. What do you see here?
Yeah, I like Fitzpatrick. I'm going to play him. My big concern is monitoring Fitzpatrick and Corey Connors just because of how natural and easy that pivot will be in lineups where Fitzpatrick is $100 cheaper and rating well. So I will need to monitor the ownership levels between those two. But I do, without any of that considered, I like Fitzpatrick a lot in the player pool for sure. Ryan Fox, who Sia mentioned, I like Ryan Fox quite a bit in this particular setup. And part of that is, yes, I know he's had a lot of success on the DP tour, had pretty good success, on all tours, right? Frankly, I still don't think people are comfortable paying an $8,500 price tag for Ryan Fox when some of the other names are available. I think DFS at this event for whatever reason, plays more like a major championship than a normal event. And I think because of that, Ryan Fox probably goes overlooked, under-owned. And then I think it's fine time to buy back in on Sepp Straka a little bit at 8,700 as well.
Yeah, he struggled a little bit in recent weeks, or at least has cooled off from what we saw at the beginning of the year and towards the beginning of the summer. Now, I want to continue here because we're going to start to get into some names that are not nearly as familiar. We're going to have to make sure the homework is done and all the research has been completed. We've got the 7s and the 6s to go. It's 135 golfers. We're going to cover those two tiers after a quick word from our partners.
The crowd loves champions.
Gladiator 2 is an epic spectacle.
To amuse you is my only wish.
The glory is yours, not mine.
Very good.
Gladiator 2, rated R. Now streaming on Paramount Plus.
All right, let's rock through the $7,000 range. Lots of golfers here. Rasmus Højgaard and Taylor Pendrith lead the way at 7,900. The middle of this range, the other Højgaard, Nikolai, Benyon, Brian Harman. The bottom of this range, Bud Cauley, Alex Smalley, Christian Bezuidenhout, and a lot of other guys here. See, I have skipped a lot of names. Let's find the diamonds in the rough, please.
Yeah, I'm going to mention, I'll try to limit it to like 4 or 5 names, as I have, like, I'm looking at a split screen here and I've got like 12 names written down.
Okay.
I'm going to start with Max Grazerman, discount Sam Burns. This is a guy just like Sam Burns I've been on all year. Great off the tee, great with the putter, just the right mix you want here. And oh, by the way, he was T21 here last year. And what's really incredible about that is he lost off the tee. He lost strokes off the tee. So I don't expect that to happen again. I think Max Grazerman has tremendous upside. Dietrich is another guy that's probably going to be pretty popular because he's played really well here. T26, T42, T10 in the last 3 years. And what's really cool about that, Rick, looking at your site, he's gained ball striking in each of those 3 in a pretty appreciable way. So I like that about Thomas Dietrich. A couple more names. Matteo Manacero, T15 in 2024, ball striking very, very good during that T15. I like him. Jordan Smith is a name I mentioned on the front end of the show. I'll just mention Tristan Lawrence because I've been on him for like 3 or 4 weeks now. I think he's interesting. And then if you're really looking for a diamond in the rough, Victor Perez and Kevin Yu. I think those are the diamonds in the rough that have tremendous upside.
All right, I'll pull up Victor Perez here. Now, before I move this over to Mike and I'll pull up Victor Perez's profile. Do you think this is kind of strange, right? You know, sometimes there's just this natural bias towards Americans. Do the Europeans get like this natural, like, they know how to play link style golf, right? Like they know how to play in these types of conditions. Doesn't really matter if they've been playing on the PGA Tour for the last decade. Like, do you think that's a real thing, or am I making that up?
No, it's definitely a real thing, but it's only for a select number of World Tour golfers that, frankly, shows like this talk about. What we're going to see is 3 or 4 names that are really talked about starting basically yesterday or today through Wednesday. Don't forget, guys and girls, set your lineups a little earlier than normal as this is going to go off earlier than normal over in Scotland. But yeah, I think guys like Jordan Smith, Manacero is probably going to be mentioned a little bit. So I do think there's going to be 3 or 4 guys that are going to get a lot of attention, and we'll see the ownership spike when we do the Wednesday live chat. But there's probably a couple of other guys that, because of that, aren't getting the right ownership, whether they're European or not, or whatever, World Tour players or not. So I think that would be sort of the pivot to make in DFS.
All right, Mike, we've started down the rabbit hole that is the $7,000 range. We've got a handful of names. Which ones are most exciting to you?
Chris Goddard. We've talked about him every show we've done. I actually looked at the results. It was quite amazing. I don't think he's actually finished inside the top 15 still.
No,
one time,
but he hasn't finished. But he hasn't finished outside the top 30.
Right. Every time he's made the cut since January, he has been January 5th. So yeah, in the last 6 months, every time he has made the cut at an event, he has finished inside the top 28. The worst finish while making the cut was 28th at the Charles Schwab. And there are a number of these tournaments, particularly the last 3, the John Deere, Rocket Mortgage, and the US Open, where he was very close to a top 5 finish. I love where he's at on tee to green right now. Almost 7 strokes over the last 3 tournaments, 6 averaging over the last 5. I think his price point should have moved. I know this is a different style of golf. I know it's halfway across the world and it could go very wrong, but the recent form and what we've seen from him, I do firmly believe he should not be 7K, 7,100. I think he could be closer to 8K. So it'll be Goddard up for me. There's like 4 guys here at 7 to 7,200 that I'm sprinkling 2 to 3 of them in lineups, and I'm getting the 3 guys at the top that I love. And that's just the way it's been getting built. The others are Kevin Yu, who Sia mentioned. I like Kevin Yu a lot here. Jake Knapp. Jake Knapp is similar to Goddard in that he's got the distance and just has been dialed in. When I talk about Goddard and Knapp, they're top 15 players in this field in terms of total strokes gained over the last 24 to 36 rounds. Willing to buy in on that at that price point. And then Ryan Gerard let me down last week. It was Gerard and Griffin who missed the
Griffin.
Gerard is 7K and very good with those long irons. Those 4 are going to be heavily in my lineups.
Can we talk about this guy? Aldrich Pocketer.
He's 5th. He's the next. There's like 5 of these guys between 7 flat and 7,200.
Can we enlist the audience on this one? We need to crowdsource this. I don't know why. I don't know what happened for him to WD last week. I don't know if it was an injury. I don't know. Do we have any information on this?
No.
So just to be clear, this is a guy who went T6 win. Then he was very, very good through the first 2 rounds at the John Deere. Something happened on Saturday. I kind of assume it's an injury because he was miserable on the golf course. Then he withdrew after the round.
Yeah.
And I have not heard what is going on. This is a golf course that rewards distance. He's been obviously phenomenal. I need to know more. So if you've got information about Pocketer, like tweet at us because I would like to know that. But certainly falls in line with what you were saying, Mike, the Goddard ups and naps of the world.
Yeah. That's what I'm looking for. Again, if you're 7K, recent form suggests you could easily be 8K and you check the distance, which distance is your friend at this setup, in my opinion.
I tend to agree. Anybody else in the 7K range that is worth a conversation before we move on?
I'll mention 2 more guys, one with kind of an odd price. I'll start with the one that's not an odd price. Lee Hodges at 7,100, T12 in 2023, approach play, long irons. He checks those boxes. Benny On, T3 in 2023. Interesting miscut in 2022. That's when it was not a co-sanctioned event, right, Rick? In 2022? This is
that was Xander's year. So
okay.
I think it was a co-sanctioned event.
Okay, fair enough. But yeah, T3 in 2023, and he does fit the profile to some degree, particularly off the tee. The weird price to me is Nejad Peterson at 7,600. No experience here, but certainly checks the distance box. I find that's one of those like Pearson Cootie prices from last week where I'm like, do I read into that and say, because I would have thought Nejad Peterson, like he's been good, but I would have thought he would have been a little cheaper than this is all I'm saying here.
Yeah, he's got a lot of really good DP World Tour results. He's $7,600. It is an interesting price tag because there are guys that have similar or better-ish profiles that are cheaper than he is. Speaking of which, let's get to the $6,000 range here. Some familiar names at the top: Gary Woodland, Jacob Bridgman, Eric Van Rooyen are all 6,900. The middle of this range, that's Alex Fitzpatrick, Andy Sullivan, Grant Forrest, Brian Campbell, last week's winner. And then the bottom of this range, Luke Donald's in this field. Aki Stridham is in this field. Dylan Naidu, Dale Whitnell, Pablo Larrazabal, or as he would say it, Larrazabal, right? I think he's from Spain. Eclectic field to say the least. Mike, where do you want to go?
I say this a lot, but I'm confident I'm not playing anyone in the 6K range. So I'm still going to give you names, but I'm not going to play them because there are so many in that 7 to 72 range we just mentioned that I think that you're going to be able to find still combinations I would say that are unique enough, particularly given how high I am on guys like Ludwig and some of the others. My builds, I think, are going to be fine. So I'm not dipping there. I'm obligated to say Gary Woodland at 6,900 in a tough field.
Yeah, that's in your
It's in my contract. Right? So I will say that. How about Toasty? I think he's long enough off the tee. I think he's got the skill sets. Yeah, and he actually rates out pretty well around the green. So again, the two metrics that I think you should be weighting: driving distance and around the green play. Alejandro Toasty does kind of check those boxes a little bit.
Alejandro Toasty, how much is he, Mike?
6,500.
6,500. I didn't scroll far enough. $6,500 for Toasty. Okay, Sia, do you see yourself avoiding the 6K range, or are you willing to dip down into these waters?
No, I'm taking another scan. There's a couple of guys I do like. I mentioned a few minutes ago that I like Jacob Bridgman. He's another guy that I played a little while ago, and he's starting to regain the form a little bit. Like typically we know what we get from Jacob Bridgman, a little wayward off the tee, which really shouldn't hurt him too bad here. The long iron play though is why I was on Jacob Bridgman in the first place. We're talking like a couple of months ago on the early wedge. So I like that. I like his ability to putt. And I like how he spiked last week at the John Deere Classic. Obviously, that's it's going to be a lot different here, but we're looking at approach play, we're looking at putting, we're looking at long irons specifically. Jacob Bridgman checks all those boxes. So I really like him. Maybe one other name I'll point out, maybe two. Ferguson, up and down on the World Tour, but he has shown an ability to spike. And Matty Schmid at 6,900 does fit. His name it was hot for a little while. It's kind of cooled off, but he does fit the course profile here at 6,900.
Just like his putter was hot for a while and has cooled off. No, I'm just kidding. How much will you take, Mike, from this week for next week? Right? It's kind of you kind of get these two lumped together. It's almost like an 8-round tournament. How much will you take from this week to next week?
I would say a little. I'm very curious to watch at the top, really the top three, and see kind of how they play and how they treat this event, and I never like to suggest that someone's not trying to win it, but next week matters more than this week. I think there's little doubt to that. Right. So, we've seen top players not play this event and play next week. Right. So I'm going to be paying attention to it towards the top. I want to say that it'll impact what I do, but I think that the biggest thing when we're talking DFS specifically, for me, it'll just be, is someone relatively popular playing really well this week, and how does it impact their ownership next week? That's what I think the biggest takeaway from me will be.
Well, I also think, and it's a really good conversation to have, but I also think, Sia, like there are some specific golfers that I'm very interested in watching.
Yeah.
Colin Morikawa, I think, is probably top of the list. Victor Hovland, back from neck injury, I think is close to the top of the list, right? Are there any of those guys for you that it's like, okay, I'm going to need to use this as a little bit of a temperature check?
Yeah, I would say I kind of agree with Mike. It's the guys towards the top that I'm really interested to see where they're at. Your guy, Victor Hovland, your friend, Victor Hovland, I think I'm interested in. Ludwig, I'm very interested in. Mike's guy, Xander, another guy I'm very interested in. Rory can show up at any given moment. So I'm not really worried about how Rory or Scottie play, but it's those guys right below them that I'm going to be very kind of locked in on. Just get a general idea of how they're playing, how they're, just finishing rounds, how they're finishing tournaments going into next week. I will say, like, the guys that I like in like that 8K range, for example, like Fitzpatrick or Adam Scott or Ryan Fox, they could have a terrible tournament, and I'm not going to shy away from them next week. I'm not really worried about seeing those guys in particular, just because I like how they profile in general, and I like the form that they've got coming in. But it's those guys at the top that we might put some serious outright bets on that can anchor our lineups at the top that I'm really curious to see.
Well, we are a long way from done here. Sia's warning should be well heeded. Heed Sia's warning and get your lineups in and your wagers in early, because if you're thinking about tinkering on Thursday morning, you're too late. And make sure to tune in to more early wedge, the best bet show, 7 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesday. That's the next crack at it. And of course, more content along the way. For now, Thank you very much, producer Josh. He does all the hard work behind the scenes. See you, Nejad, Mike McClure. I'm Rick Gehman. This has been the Early Wedge. We'll catch you next time.